By the end of it, I was convinced that Farage had been horribly anti-Semitic at Dulwich. It was much more less clear on the question of racism against Asians and black people.
It's Emily.
It's Lewis.
And on today's episode, we're going to try and get to the bottom of three things. Namely, what did Farage say at school in Dulwich when he was a late teenager? What does he admit to saying? What does he deny having said? And does it make any difference to how people see the reform leader now? If he was racist, if he was anti-Semitic then, is he still now? And does the electorate mind if he is?
Yeah, so this, as we were saying, is fresh reports in The Guardian, which, in fairness, as we're going to discuss, actually build on reports and allegations that have been around for over a decade now. But in the last few days, The Guardian have put together a special report which suggests and claim that while Farage was at the public school, fee-paying school, Dulwich College in southeast London, they have got more than a dozen former classmates who have claimed that Farage, as I say, has made repeated remarks such as Hitler was right, gassed them, directed those comments at Jewish pupils, other minority students, often sang a school group song including slurs like "We'll gas all the and we'll gas all the." Farage has strongly denied the allegations. He's called them entirely without foundation and questioned the relevance and indeed the memories of incidents from very, very long ago. But in the wake of that, it hasn't stopped number 10 drawing sharp political criticism of the comments, with the Prime Minister's spokesperson, no less, saying that those claims are disturbing and urging Farage to address them publicly.
And when I came across those comments in the Guardian piece this week, it triggered a sort of muscle memory for me because I'd remembered hearing them before. And the reason I'd heard them before is because, frankly, a lot of them come from the work of Michael Crick, an old colleague of mine at Newsnight. He's done the biography of Nigel Farage in a book called One Party After Another, and he made a piece for Channel 4, which, as Lewis said, is over a decade old. It was made in 2013, where he went to Dulwich College. He talked to teachers. He talked to pupils at the time. He had evidence of letters sent at that time, people who remembered and had taught and had been at school with Nigel Farage. And so we thought we should ask Michael Crick to talk to us about his original reporting and also to reflect on the difference in Farage's own attitude to the allegations that were made at the time and how he's responded right now. Well, joining us now is the broadcaster and writer Michael Crick. We used to work together many moons ago at Newsnight, and then you left us for Channel 4. And the reason we want to talk to you today, Michael, is because so much of the story that we've been talking about today is familiar from your own work, both in the book you wrote about Farage and in the original broadcast, I think took us back to 2013-14 for Channel 4, where you describe in a lot of detail the scenes at Dulwich College and the memories of teachers, the deputy headmaster at Dulwich College when Farage was there.
That's right. It was back in 2013, and I love looking in people's distant pasts because you get sort of clues as to their character now. And it didn't take many calls to find people who remembered Farage as anti-Semitic and horribly anti-Semitic. And then I had a moment of luck because a guy called Bob Jope, who was an English teacher at Dulwich College, had kept this letter from one of the other English teachers, a woman called Chloe Deakin, to the high master, the headmaster, called the master at Dulwich College, about how Farage was utterly unsuitable to be a prefect.
And he did get made a prefect.
He did. And I rushed down to Torquay, it was, where Bob Jope lived. And he got the letter out and we filmed it and everything. And it was amazing. It went on for about 5 pages about how Farage was a sort of neo-Nazi and a fascist and all of that. And then I managed to get the other side of the argument. The deputy head explained, well, Farage was, we thought a lot of it was just being provocative and so on. And then we put the film together and I doorstepped Farage, I think on the day of transmission. And he actually came out with a pretty equivocal response. Are we about to hear it?
Yeah.
You like to see the letter?
I've seen it before.
Have you?
Well, not for 30 years. Yes, of course, I said some ridiculous things that upset
Racist
them.
things.
Not necessarily racist things,
Not
but things...
necessarily racist.
Well, it depends how you define it. You see, I mean, you've got to remember that ever since 1968, up until the last couple of years, we've not been able in this country intelligently to discuss immigration, to discuss integration. It's all been a buried subject, and that's happened through academia, it's happened through politics and the media.
But I mean, that letter, for instance, it cites an example of you taunting someone in class and having to be excluded.
I was excluded
by implication on racial grounds.
I was excluded from class dozens of times over the years for all
for
sorts
racist
of
comments?
reasons. No. I don't accept that. You know,
I mean, it's not just that
I
letter.
was excluded
Fellow
from class.
pupils remember you making racist comments.
Well, I might have wound some of them up too, but all through.
So you made
all
racist
through-
comments to wind people up?
all through the 1970s and 80s.
Did you find that at the time? Did you find that a very satisfactory explanation, Michael?
No, and it wasn't a very good interview by me. I should have been a lot harder on him towards the end of that. But it's a softer response, a more equivocal response than the one that he's given this week.
Yes.
Where he adamantly says he was never racist and never said anything racist or anti-Semitic, and this is all and there's
Smear.
a statement put out by the Reform UK. And all about how there's no corroboration and so on. Whereas I think Farage, really having said that, and that has been repeated in newspapers and in my book, he should have gone along the same lines, frankly, now. I mean, personally, I think I might, if I was Farage, I might have actually said, look, I did say some awful things at school.
'Cause
You
I was a
do terrible
schoolboy.
things as a schoolboy, and I deeply apologise if I offended people, and I'm sorry about that, but that's not what I am today.
A lot of the public would probably accept that.
Yeah.
I'm presuming. I mean, it is interesting. I mean, what you just said is exactly what I thought. The difference in how he's responded to you then and now, I think is quite telling about his evolution as a politician.
Well, there are two sides to Farage, and that was the sort of gentler side. And I think what we've seen this week is the nasty side, and he will have felt cornered this week, and he might be feeling crikey. This could cause quite a lot of damage.
Even though, actually, what the Guardian, as we've said, even though that which the Guardian has reported is basically what you reported over a decade ago.
I know, but I mean, Farage he wasn't even an MP then. He
The
was
stakes are
leader
high.
of a rising party that was winning by-elections. He hadn't even got anybody into Parliament at that stage. Now the stakes are far higher. And although, how many Jewish people are there in this country? 300,000 or 400,000. Well, he may have trouble getting many votes from them. He may have trouble getting donations from Jewish donors, but then there will be a much wider community. You'd think that some of the stuff that they've heard this week, and some of the taunting, and some of the very vivid memories from Jewish boys at Dulwich College. If you've had that happen to you, it will have stuck in your brain for the rest of your life. I mean, things that taunted me about at school were not anything, I'm not Jewish, so, but, there would be lots of banter at school. People would say horrible things. But if you are Jewish and Farage is saying things about you being gassed and Hitler being right and so on, and singing this awful song, Gas 'em All, that will have stuck in your brain forever. And that's why I think this evidence is so powerful, and that it's foolish of Farage and his party to try and pretend that people's memories are at fault.
So you don't
So he
believe
didn't
it?
deny
No.
that, Michael, because he said that he didn't even know the words to the song. There is no question in your mind that he did say those things, and he did repeat those lyrics, and he did taunt. I mean,
There is no doubt. And when I came to write the book, there was a doubt when I started off, because I was worried that half the people you spoke to from Dulwich remembered horrible stuff like this, but the other half said, "No, I don't remember anything like that. He was very political, and he was on the right, and he was provocative. But I don't remember him ever being racist or anti-Semitic." And they also pointed out that one of his best friends at school was a black boy. And I thought, well, I want to get to the bottom of this. I want to be fair to Farage, and so I set out. And I put an absurd amount of work into it, along with my former wife Margaret, who was helping me with the research. And this was all during COVID, so it was quite difficult to do. We tracked down about 60 or 70 boys. We got the lists of the pupils at Dulwich College, and systematically went through them. And of course, one person led to another. And by the end of it, I was convinced that Farage had been horribly anti-Semitic at Dulwich. It was much less clear on the question of racism against Asians and black people. And Dulwich was interesting because there weren't actually that many boys, Jewish boys at. I was surprised how few there were. There weren't that many. And in a way, that must have made it even worse for them. I mean, I went to a school very similar to Dulwich in Manchester Grammar School, where it was about 20% Jewish. You would never have got away with that at my school. But at Dulwich, a lot fewer Jewish boys. And I think actually what happened is some of the staff should be responsible for this, for not cracking down on it, and not cracking down when Farage and his mates were singing, horrible songs on the
you've
coach.
Said no doubt. We just have to give you the spokesperson for Reform, who said they've denied him ever being racist and anti-Semitic at school. Questioned why some of those who had given testimony had not made the claims before. Clearly, they had made the claims before to you over a decade ago. And they then say there is no primary evidence. It's one person's word against another.
Well, there is. Well, first of all, there is primary evidence in the letter that was sent from the school teacher Chloe Deakin to the headmaster of Dulwich College, complaining about the fact he'd been made a prefect, and it's not one person's word against another. It's about a dozen people's word against another, and many of those are people who have good reason to remember vividly the taunts that Farage made because they are Jewish. And I think that if you are yourself Jewish, you will remember that much more vividly than if you're not.
The Telegraph has said, in their write-up to this, they've said that what this is basically doing is holding a child to not only adult standards, but the standards of today, and that's fundamentally unfair. What do you make of that argument, Michael?
Well, I think there's something in that. It depends what age we're talking about. And it seems to me that this went on from a period from about 13, age 13, to certainly into the sixth form, when Farage would have been, 16, 17, 18.
Because you don't get made a prefect until you're in your last years.
And I would accept that if somebody said something horrible like that at 13, it's less serious than if they carried on saying it. 16. After all, we're about to give the vote in this country to people of 16 and 17. Yeah. I think that's a foolish idea, but nonetheless, that is to happen. And I do think he is certainly much more responsible for what he said when he was 16 and 17 and 18 than he was when he was perhaps 13. So I don't fully hold the Telegraph argument. I think one of the fascinating things about Farage at Dulwich College, I mean, I've written quite a few biographies and I've done a lot of television profiles, and I don't think I know of a case where the ingredients of the later man or woman are in their school days. Nearly, so much of the Farage we see today is the Farage we saw at Dulwich College. Now, I'm not saying that Farage is anti-Semitic or racist today. I think that's a complicated discussion to have. But if you look at other aspects of his character, the boy who loves being the centre of attention, who loves being provocative, who loves being divisive, who dresses
he's a politician,
smartly.
isn't he? I mean, many politicians
Indeed,
have those
he was a
characteristics.
political creature. At school, you don't get that many political creatures. He was a political creature, though.
You said something really interesting, which is, you're not saying that he's racist or anti-Semitic today, which is a discussion we should have. Well, let's have that then,
right.
Because in a way that is the relevance, isn't it? The question we're asking is whether the seeds of a racist or an anti-Semite were sown at Dulwich College, which remain today. Now, there are two possibilities: that he wasn't then and he isn't now, or that he was then and he still is now, or that he was then, but somehow he isn't now.
I think it's even more complicated than that. But I agree, the seeds of his politics were at Dulwich. In terms of the Farage today, I don't think you can say in any way whatsoever that he's anti-Semitic today. He is a huge supporter of Israel.
There's no evidence for it that I've seen anywhere.
No. I spoke to lots of people who fell out with Farage, hated him, but were close to him in UKIP. And so it would have been their opportunity for them to say, and by the way, he was a terrible racist, I remember him saying this, but none of them did. And indeed, in most cases, I specifically asked them whether they remembered anything about Farage being racist, and they would say, No, although, they would say he was a terrible bully, or he was a terrible this or that, and he, terribly authoritarian, or he was really nasty. But none of his other critics from his adult life would say that he was a racist. On the other hand, Farage has always been, for instance, him and Tommy Robinson. I mean, Tommy Robinson was one of the reasons. One of his many successors as UKIP leader, Gerard Batten, brought Tommy Robinson in as an advisor, and that was the final straw for Farage, and he left UKIP and then went off and founded.
Because of the
Brexit,
racism, or because of the competitiveness?
Well, he said because of the racism, and I think that is true. I think that in terms of, Farage having sort of, well, certainly he never says anything racist, but he does at times pander to racism through some of the things he says, and particular about migrants. And so it's a tricky area. It's a tricky area. But I mean, he's also got black friends, like he did at school. Derek Chisora, for instance, the boxer, is very close to Farage, and so on. So it's
Farage has always argued, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Michael, he's actually argued. I mean, and listeners and viewers can make of this what they will. He says that he has done more to defeat the far right than any other politician in the country, because he says that what he did in destroying or helping, he claims to have helped destroy the BNP, to have driven this sort of extremism from the right of politics and made what is the right of politics more acceptable and softer than it otherwise would have been.
Robinson doesn't seem to be particularly destroyed as we speak.
No. But I think the argument is, and I think there's some truth in this, that there was a period in the late noughties, the period sort of 70 in the early years of Farage's leadership of UKIP, where the BNP, amazingly, were getting twice as many votes as UKIP even in places like Henley-on-Thames.
And they did well in the European elections of 2009.
Actually,
they went bankrupt. I mean, don't forget, they had financial difficulties, and they ended up in a place where they went completely bankrupt. I mean, maybe you could say that was because people left. I don't know, but I don't think it was as simple as
in the European elections of 2009. What happened there? It was partly Farage's leadership, but it was also partly the accident of the MP's expenses affair. Yeah. Suddenly, nobody wanted to vote for the Westminster parties, Labour, Conservative, Liberal, Democrat. Who was the next option? They thought, and they all voted for UKIP. Ironically, because UKIP were the biggest expensive fiddlers of all in the European Parliament. And suddenly, Farage then got a lot more seats than the BNP did. There was an internal civil war within the BNP, and suddenly UKIP emerged, and the BNP, partly, and probably maybe even primarily, because of its own internal problems and I forgot Nick Griffin's disastrous appearance on Question Time and so on, went into decline. But of course, since then, UKIP, Farage's various parties, UKIP and then Brexit and now Reform, have been the most serious party on the right of to the right of the Conservatives, and there's no prospect of a party to the right of them really emerging. Whereas in Europe, parts of Europe, I think you can say there are right-wing parties that are to the right of where Reform are now, and that. Farage has acted, because of his extraordinary skills as a politician, has acted as a barrier, really, to preventing our politics going even more to the right.
I guess what I'd say, though, Michael,
Yes.
is if you call him a barrier, if what he's doing or what he would like to do if he ever led the country is enact policies which are essentially mass deportation policies of the kind that we've seen in America now, and some in his party have suggested that they would like to see that. That doesn't seem to me to be a barrier. That seems to me to be an encircling of the same
It's all terribly
policies.
complicated, isn't it? Now that we have, the two mainstream parties are frankly now pursuing policies that are pretty close to what Farage and his parties were advocating some years ago. So the whole of politics is shifting so rapidly, It's
which
very
Farage
hard to
has
pin
been.
all this
As Tommy
down.
Robinson
And Farage
told us this week, the Overton window is, what was it, decimated?
But
or
the truth is that Farage has
obliterated?
been way more instrumental in that than Tommy Robinson has.
Yeah.
Even now, even though Robinson is being legitimised perhaps to a disturbing extent, Farage has been the sort of driving factor behind that. I suppose the question, Michael, I want to sort of get at is that to sort of go back almost to where we started, which is, if someone's listening to this and basically just thinking, this is all very interesting, and yes, it clearly shows that, as we've known for a long time, that, Farage has been, on the right, on the radical right of British politics, since an early age. He was an admirer of Enoch Powell, long after he made the Rivers of Blood speech in '68, etc., etc. But ultimately, a schoolboy's school days, does it tell us anything about the modern man? I mean, is he basically hiding something from us, or is it actually of relatively little interest, and most people do embarrassing things when they're at school?
His school days do tell us a lot about the modern man, but I think actually on the race and anti-Semitism point, it is not that helpful. It shows that Farage was anti-immigration in those days. It shows that he was a nationalist. It shows he was on the right. It shows he was a political creature, like dressing smartly. So many features of his character you can trace back to Dulwich College. But I think that after, once he became an adult, from his late 20s onwards, I think there is certainly overt racism you cannot really find. But you've got this whole troubling area, which I think that I think he does pander to racists. For instance, it would be interesting to know, and I'm not aware of any occasions, what does Farage say to somebody in the street who comes out with a racist view? But maybe I'm being unfair to him there, and that I've never heard this happen, and nobody else has recorded or whatever. But that is an interesting area to explore.
Can I just follow up from Lewis's question with something that brings us to today? As you said at the beginning, the change in his own response is very noticeable now. And yet when you accosted him or found him on the street in 2013, that was a decade ago, that didn't do him any political harm. So it did.
I mean, Channel 4 News, never had a huge audience. We were always competing with you. I worked for both, but they were always competing. It was always
minority pursuits.
Yeah, minority. And I'm not sure that many people followed it up.
Well, I guess,
it.
My question's slightly different, though, which is, if he was sort of fine to engage with the premise, you, in 2013, and he's slamming the door shut on these accusations now, is that because are there a lot of people in the country, I guess I'm asking, who simply don't really care if he is racist or if he is anti-Semitic? I mean, they
don't
still
care
vote
about
for
his
him.
school days anyway.
Well, I think it's more than that. Would
Well,
would people
actually
not vote for him if they thought he was racist? I'm not sure that's true.
Well, there would be some people who wouldn't vote for him, and I think it would cause him some problems. But I think
you don't think it's
right.
built into the brand that walks like a duck, talks like a duck. You
There are
don't
some
have
people
to
who
call
think
it out.
he's not racist enough. I mean, there are
Well,
plenty of people
right.
who would say that he's not
So he
sufficiently
is what
right
he
wing.
is. In which case, that's my question. Why does he have to sort of distance himself from this report when actually a lot of people would say, oh, no, we understood what he was saying. He was just talking about migration, or he was just talking common sense, or he was just saying it like it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating that he and his party. I mean, I think you probably got the two different sides to. I think actually, way back in 2013, when I doorstepped him in the street, if I remember rightly, he sort of knew we were going to be there, and he had a bit of time to
He's
think
got a
about
smile
it.
on his face.
Yeah, and he'd thought through. I've got to relax here. I mustn't lose my temper or anything. And maybe the response this week was in the, in a Ming vase situation. I mean, they're the holders of the Ming vase right now. That they know they've got 3 years perhaps before the next election, more than 3 years, and they cannot afford to put a foot wrong. And maybe that is what caused the much more adamant response that I've never said anything like this, and it's all fabricated by our enemies. But the contrast is very different. Yeah, and also I mean, Trump is an influence on the way he behaves, and that's a fascinating conversation, perhaps for another day. But as I say, I think I would have apologised actually, but that would be a risk too. Maybe that is only the kind of risk he could have taken 12 years ago.
It's very 1990s, that sort of approach.
And with Downing Street within his grasp, I mean, personally, I don't think he'll get there. But
You don't?
No, and I think Lewis has said something about this, but I maybe not. I think the results
of
the Caerphilly by-election 2 or 3 weeks ago was fascinating, because what happened there was all the other parties ganged up on reform, and clearly Conservatives and certainly Labour people were willing to vote for Plaid in a way that they never would have done in the past, simply to stop Farage. And actually, the same thing clearly happened in the Runcorn by-election, where we were all expecting a decent majority, and they only won by 6 in the end. And that, of course, is how Farage was, on a constituency level, blocked from becoming an MP back in 2015 when he was standing in South Thanet. And of course, there's rumours swirling around now that Labour might be tempted to bring in the alternative voting system before the end of this Parliament, and that would then sort of institutionalise tactical voting. I think tactical voting, we keep going on about it, and how it gets big. It seems to get bigger with every election. I think it's going to be huge at the next election.
I think, and this is, I think, part of precisely the reason why he's responded with this fury, right? Because they're trying to break through that threshold they seem reasonably stuck at, which is high, but they would like it to be high. 26, 27, 28. They want to get to 30 to 35. So, and this is exactly the sort of thing that could prevent them from doing that. I just thought, finally, Michael, you spent a lot of time with Farage. I've spent quite a lot of time with him. I don't think quite as much as you, but you know him well, and you've written a biography of him. I know you say you don't think he would become Prime Minister, but let's just imagine for a moment that he did become Prime Minister in whatever form, minority government or whatever. How would you feel about that, knowing him as you do?
I wouldn't be very comfortable about it. I think, we could there'd be all sorts of terrible policies. I'm actually quite right-wing on immigration policies. But on other stuff like, global warming, foreign aid, I think would be appalling from my point of view. But I would also think it would be appalling. It would be utterly chaotic. I mean, Farage has never really run anything. And he falls out with everybody. I mean, it would be like Trump won, where everybody kept resigning every few months.
In a parliamentary system.
Yeah.
Because what Farage would love is a presidential system, right? That would be
exactly,
perfect.
and he's actually said that he would have to rejig his government, so lots of ministers weren't members of Parliament, and presumably they'd have to be in the Lords, that would cause a big hoo-ha as it is. But we've seen in these new councils, which are now controlled by reform, the number of people, that they're finding it's much more difficult to do what they intended to do than they thought it would be. And indeed, we've seen a huge turnover in reform councillors, people resigning or defecting. And of course, that's been the pattern with Farage's parties all along the line, way back to 25 years ago when they started getting people into the European Parliament. That a lot of them end up defecting, resigning, going to jail, and that the same would happen here. You've got the latest case with Nathan Gill, who I think is due to be sentenced tomorrow for accepting bribes from pro-Russians. So it would be utter chaos, and I think actually, in his mind, Farage loves the idea of being elected Prime Minister and living in number 10. But I think he actually is quietly terrified about what then happens, what you do next, and they are doing a lot of work to sort of try and work policy out, because policy's never been something that Farage has been that interested in. Indeed, there have been occasions in the past where he's admitted not to reading his own party's manifesto or knowing what was in it. But he's doing a lot more work on that. And of course, they've got think tanks going, and they do these weekly press conferences now where they do a lot of policy stuff in between the questions from journalists about other issues. So I think it would be. I would be worried. And I thought the other thing is it would be a very authoritarian government. At heart, he is a Stalinist.
Didn't see that one coming.
Does he deny that? Can we check that, team?
Michael Crick.
And an admirer of both Trump and Putin.
Great to have you on. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming in.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.